Hey everyone, welcome to Meeple Bits. Thanks for joining me today. So I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I know I do a lot of my intros and read it from, well, you can clearly tell that I'm reading it from a screen to kind of preface the lead into the game. But today, I'm going to read it straight from the box because it's got the cool description right on it. Super PACS, the game of politics about the game of politics. Welcome to the United States of Humerica, a place with corrupt and incompetent leaders, shady financial interests, and lobbying groups so powerful that anyone seeking election must bend to their will. Those who seek to gain power must build a broad coalition of factions and exploit them to win elections and get filthy rich. Any resemblance to actual organizations or real people is purely coincidental. So join me as we go through a setup and playthrough of the game Super PACS. Hey everyone, welcome to a 3-player setup of the game Super PACS, the game of politics about the game of politics. To begin, you're going to want to deal out, or rather, I guess let me talk about the different cards on the table, and then I'll go ahead and go through the setup and what everything is. There's going to be a community board that you're going to place in the center of the table for everyone to have access to. There's going to be faction and money cards, which you're going to place all the factions into their deck like so. Now, in this deck, it's all factions, but you'll notice that the money cards share the same background so that when the factions are in your hand, no one knows if it's money or factions. Investment cards, leader cards, and then lastly, event cards with an orange background. So to begin the setup, you're going to deal out 5 faction cards to each player, which I've already done, so everyone's got their 5 faction cards. Next, you're going to deal out 2 money megabucks to each player. And scoop that up. 2 megabucks to each player. Same background, so everyone should start with a hand size of 7 cards. Take the remaining megabucks and then set them in their respective places on the board. All the 1s going there, all the 5s going here. And then lastly is going to be the event cards. So for the event cards, you'll notice up here there's a 90-degree angle rotation and then the other events. You're going to take the White House event card, place it face down at a 90-degree angle, and then on top of that, you're going to take 2 event cards and place it on top like so. Do the same thing with the Senate card, placing it again at a 90-degree angle, placing 2 more event cards on top of that at the opposite angle. And then lastly, the House of Representatives card, which you'll notice there's a typo on this one where it says Congress election, same as that one. But put it on top, and in this case though, for the first one, you're going to use 3 event cards to place on top, giving you a total of 10 event cards. There's going to be 7 total events and the 3 elections. So you should have a total event of 10, which indicates the full round of the game. Take all the remaining event cards and put them in the box. Next up, take the investment deck, shuffle it, and then put 4 investments out like so in their respective locations. 1, 2, 3, 4. Take all the tokens, put them out in the middle because they'll be used possibly through the game. First player marker, set that aside for however you want to choose to distribute the first player. And then lastly, leader cards. Distribute 3 leader cards to each player, and then they're going to go through those leader cards and choose 1. For players 2 and 3, I've already chosen theirs, so here's our 3 leaders to choose from. Red is for the, I guess, right wings, and blue is for the left wings. But I'm going to go ahead and shuffle and then just pick one at random. That's our leader. And then put the other leaders in the box. And that's your initial setup. Now you're ready to play. The object of the game is to amass the most power throughout the 10 rounds or the 10 events that are going to happen throughout the game. Once all 10 rounds are complete, then you score up all of the power. The person with the most power wins. In the case of a tie, all players lose. And lastly, there are some player reference cards which are quite helpful. So here's the player reference card, which tells you the different iconography for stats, which is votes, wealth, power, actions for supplies and exploit, and the different faction types: belief, criminal, financial, immune, justice, media, and social. It'll also give you an explanation of the different types of actions that you're going to take throughout the game, as indicated on the reverse side of the player reference card. On your turn, you're going to choose an initial action, A or B, not both, campaign or embezzle. Then you're going to choose a main action, exploit, sneak, fundraise. I'll go through these actions in just a moment, once I go through the different iconography on the cards. Once per round, you can use your leader's superpower. I'll address mine in just a moment. And anytime during your turn, you can buy one or more investment cards. You can buy investments at any point during your turn until it's over. And then surprise, when stated on the card during the elections or other people's turn, you can discard a faction with this kind of gesture iconography and then follow the instructions on the card. At the end of each round, all players reveal their cards and then an event card gets revealed. So that's the setup. That's your player reference for iconography. I'll go ahead and set that off to the side, which I'm sure I'll use throughout the tutorial here. So before we begin and go through the different types of actions, let's go ahead and take a quick peek at the different types of cards that can come up throughout the course of the game. So there's different colors also indicated on the cards. So the different colors on the factions do represent different things. The green factions are going to be your business factions. The gold factions are your, just older citizens. Here's another one. Your blue ones are your left-wing factions. Your red ones are your right-wing factions. And then your gray ones are your central or neutral factions. So as you go through the game, you're going to want to collect members of each faction to try to create as much power as possible, also while triggering any of your specials that you have along the way. So let's take a quick peek at the iconography of this hipster. He represents 2 votes, 0 money or megabucks, and 1 power. He has a power of anti-mainstream. Get 2 megabucks for each faction in your coalition. That is one of its color, including this one. So you'll get megabucks for every neutral faction in your coalition. Here's an example of Big Tobacco. Big Tobacco is worth 1 vote, 1 megabuck, and 1 power. And they have a power of secondhand smoke. Get 2 megabucks and destroy a, a social faction, there it was, or a criminal faction, as indicated here on the iconography. So anyway, guys, that's the different types of cards that are going to come out throughout the course of the game. So let's begin. Let's take a quick peek at what a turn looks like, or what each type of turn is, so that you can learn how to play the game. So during your turn, as indicated, you're going to start with choosing an initial action, followed by a main action, and you can use your superpower once per round, which is, I should probably address the leader cards. So here's my leader that I randomly selected, Zombie Neurosurgeon. Sneak the top card of the cemetery. So the cemetery, as indicated over here, is where you're going to kind of discard. So my leader's power is I can actually take the top card in the discard throughout the game on my turn. And then I can also buy investment cards on my turn at any point. So let's talk about those initial actions. Campaign or embezzle. When you campaign, you're going to perform the action of your leader. Perform the action at the top of your leader card. So here, campaign at the top of my leader card, as indicated on this one, is I'm going to draw a faction. Or I can do embezzle, which allows me to get 2 megabucks. And that's my initial action. So here, I can either draw a faction or take 2 megabucks. Next up is going to be choosing a main action, which is exploit, sneak, or fundraise. Exploit. We're going to add a faction that has this little person icon on the card to our coalition, which is going to be kind of our play area down here. If you guys are familiar with sort of, I guess, tableau builders. I don't have a tableau down here, but that's essentially what we're doing here. So I'm going to add a faction with this little guy in the lower left to my coalition, and then follow the instructions on the bottom of the card. So in this case, if I were to play the hipster in my coalition, then I would get 2 megabucks for each faction in my coalition that is also in a neutral color. And that's important to note because that is different from the other sneak, which is 2 factions. Place a faction face down into your sneak zone. So what I'm going to do is, for my sneak, if I wanted to use that as my main action, I will take 2 cards here and then sort of place them face down off to the side. Or fundraise. Fundraise is I'm going to get money, or megabucks, equal to the total wealth of all the factions in my coalition. So on my first turn, I'm probably not going to do that as my first action because I've got no one in my coalition just yet. And then lastly, buy an investment. So I can buy an investment, paying its money on the card, and then putting it into my coalition. So I'm going to pay its costs and then collect any immediate benefits, and then put it underneath my leader and replace the card taken with a new one. So for investments, here's an example of an investment for a hedge fund. I'm going to pay its cost, as indicated in the upper right, for 7 megabucks. Then I'm going to get the hedge fund, and then I'm going to draw 2 faction cards. And at the end of the game, this card is worth 3 power, or 5 if my leader is green. My leader is not green in this game, so I'm likely not going to want to go out and get this hedge fund because it doesn't benefit me a great deal. But maybe something like this cattle ranch probably would. So I would buy it for 5 megabucks, put it into my hand, do its action on the lower left, focus, draw 1 faction card. At the end of the game, it's worth 3 power, or 5 if my leader is red. When you purchase one of these, you're going to slide it underneath your leader, like so. So the game is played over the course of 10 rounds, where all players are going to take turns. They're going to, like I mentioned, take their initial action and their main action and use their superpower or buy investments as indicated. Once all players have taken a turn, you're going to resolve the top event card. Here's an example event card, marijuana legalized. And then you're going to resolve this down here. There we go. If you have any marijuana activists, you're going to get 2 megabucks. If you have organized crime, you're going to pay $2. Everyone's going to resolve this and then move on to the next round. If there was anything that indicated to change the first player, then you'll do so at that point. And then every few events is going to be an election. So at the end of every round, all the players that's played their turn, we're going to reveal eventually an election. Once that is revealed, they're going to happen in order: House of Rep, Senate, and White House. Each player is going to count up the total number of votes in their coalition and announce the total. The leader superpowers and surprise cards that can influence the elections can be played at this time. Once everyone agrees to conclude the election, the winner places the election card in his faction and coalition and takes the first player marker. And then 2 final notes before going in. There's 2 terminologies throughout the course of the game: discard a faction or destroy a faction. Discard a faction is you are instructed to discard a faction from your hand to put in the cemetery or discard pile. To destroy a faction, that means you're going to choose a faction from your coalition, a card that is already kind of in your tableau or on the table, and that's going to go into the cemetery. And unless indicated, you can actually choose any faction from any player on the table. So it's kind of a take that mechanic. But if you're the only person with the corresponding faction to destroy, then you're the only player that has to discard. Okay, and that's it, guys. That's how you set up and get ready to dive in and play Super PACS. One final note is that when you're using your leader's superpower, the cost is indicated down here in the lower right. So in order for me to sneak the top card of the cemetery, I must pay 3 megabucks to do so. But let's go ahead and dive in and play a few turns so that we can get an idea of what it looks like to go through at least a round or 2 of Super PACS. So here is my initial starting hand. Wow, I got dealt out nothing but greens. I either did a bad job of shuffling or Yeah, I guess that's just the way that it went down for me. Whoops. Okay, so for my first turn, again, we're going to choose an initial action, which is either to campaign or embezzle. Campaign, I'm going to draw a faction card, which is going to pull up from this deck. Or I'm going to embezzle, which is to get 2 megabucks. Looking at my current hand and the fact that I've only got green faction available to me, I might want to go ahead and draw a faction, so I might want to campaign in order for me to get my hand a little bit fleshed out some. I'm going to set my leader off over here and then start to add the rest of the factions here. Yeah, let's go ahead and campaign. So we're going to draw 1 card from the deck. There we go. Libertarians. It's worth 2 votes, 1 megabuck, and 1 power. Its action, don't tread on me. Discard to gain immunity from an exploit, surprise, or event. Alright, so that's my initial action. Now I need to choose my main action. Exploit, sneak, or fundraise. Exploit allows me to take a card from my hand and put it into my coalition. I can buy an investment as well, but as you see, I'm a little too broke to do so. I've only got $2, or 2 megabucks, and I need 8,555 respectively. So I can't really do any investments this turn. And I've got no one in my coalition to fundraise. So I can either A, exploit, which is to say, put this guy into my coalition, like so, and then I would do its action. Or I can sneak, which would allow me to put 2 cards face down this turn, and then at the end of the round, after all players have gone, I will put these 2 cards into my coalition. When you sneak cards into your coalition, you do not resolve their actions on the bottom. So it's kind of making a choice or a decision of exactly what to do. So in reviewing my cards, I think I might want to go with telecoms and utilities. Here's the telecoms and utilities card. It's not worth any votes. It's worth 1 megabuck if I were to campaign, and it's worth 2 power. But each opponent pays me 1 megabuck, then I choose another opponent to pay me 1 more. So this is a serious take that card so early on. Something I think I might want to go ahead and play, because then it would give me 3 additional megabucks, at which point I can purchase probably this investment card that I want to get into the game. So you know what? I think that's what I'm going to do. So for my main action, I'm going to go ahead and exploit. I'm going to exploit the telecom and utilities faction, adding it into my coalition. And then each opponent has to pay me 1, and then choose an opponent to pay me 1 more. So you know what? I'm going to have this opponent over here, player 2, pay me 2 megabucks. They're going to be who I chose to give me 1 extra. So 2 megabucks from them into my hand. So now they're broke when their turn comes around. This player giving me 1 megabuck. Now I've taken $3 or 3 megabucks into my hand. And before I conclude my turn, I'm going to go ahead and pay out the 5 megabucks like so, and purchase the top this investment card, the cattle ranch. I'm immediately going to resolve its action, draw 1 faction card like so. World Bankrupters. Forced trade, steal a faction from an opponent, then give that opponent a faction from your coalition. That'll be interesting. And then I'm going to slide this investment underneath like so. So now it's worth 3 power at the end of the game. And then I'm going to announce that that's the end of my turn. I'm not going to buy any more investments because I'm broke, and then I'm not going to use any surprise cards just yet. So I mentioned that I'm not going to do a surprises action because surprise cards do need to be taken from your hand. So I'm going to kind of hold out on using this Libertarian surprise, which discard to gain immunity from an exploit, surprise, or an event. So I'm going to probably use this potentially on whatever that top event card is. But that ends my turn. So player 2 is going to go. Let's take a quick look at their leader. So their leader is the heir apparent. Campaign. Draw a faction or discard a blue faction to draw 2. Using his power. Used during an election. Gain 2 votes for each red faction in your coalition. Lose 1 vote for each blue in your faction. That's interesting. So his power is applicable during the election periods. And let's take a quick peek at the cards that he has. We know that his 5 cards are all factions because, well, I took his money last turn. Okay, so for his initial turn, so his initial action, campaign or embezzle. He can either campaign to, let's see here, what was his power? Draw a faction, or discard a blue, which he doesn't have, to draw 2. But since I robbed him, he's probably going to want to take 2 megabucks back up into his hand. So let's do that. So his initial action is to embezzle. Get 2 megabucks. Main action, exploit sneaker fundraise. Well, given that his power is to win elections, looking at his hand here, nothing gives him a whole lot on the vote, but he's got some high power cards as well. Let's see. Take a quick gander at his different powers on the cards to see which ones he might want to exploit versus sneaking 2 into the hand. So looking at his hand, he's got Wall Street. Now the Wall Street, if exploited, he can place the investor token, there it is, on your leader. The investor token here, each investment you buy costs 1 less megabuck. So that's not bad, but I don't think I need to do it just yet. I probably want to get a few more megabucks. But I'm not going to go ahead and I'm not going to add this to my coalition yet either because I need to activate it later. This one's pretty decent, but again, I'll want to play it later. Get 2 green megabucks for each green faction. So I think I'm going to go ahead and sneak in 2 green factions if possible. No, I only have the 1. So I'm going to go ahead and sneak in 2 factions into my coalition. So I'm going to place these off to the side. And then at the end of the round, I'm going to add them into my coalition. And so that's the end of player 2's turn. They don't have enough megabucks to buy any investments, and it doesn't make sense yet to do any sort of secrets or rather surprise actions. Okay. And then the last player. The last player's leader is the Tea Party Animal. For the campaign, he is going to draw a faction or discard a gold to draw 2. His power, hijack the agenda. Sneak a faction. Costs 1 less if you have teapot crackpots. That'll cost me 2. So I can sneak in a faction as my power, which isn't too bad, actually. Okay, and let's see what player 3 has. So we know that he's got the $1 because I only took 1 from him. He has no gold factions, which would have helped him. So in looking at player 3, I think probably the best is going to be for their main action to take 2 megabucks. They need to get some money back up into their hand. Or sorry, their initial action. And then for their main action, they're going to do an exploit. So for that exploit, they're going to use the Trucksters. The Trucksters is going to get them 3 votes for the election, no money, and 2 power. Each opponent with a, what's it called, a financial, returns 1 to their hand and pays you 1 megabuck. So this is a nice way to, 1, get someone into my coalition over here, or to get into their coalition, and then penalize me, the first player who had kind of targeted them early, so I have to take my faction and put it, or my faction and put it back into my hand, and then pay them 1 megabuck. But what's interesting is I don't have the megabuck to pay them. So luckily, in the back of the rulebook, there is an FAQ. What happens if a player is required to pay megabucks and they have no cards in their hands or not enough cards? So once a player has no cards in their hand, they are exempt from further payments or discard effects. But that means they'll get paid from the treasury. I have cards in my hand, but I don't have any money cards in my hand. So it goes on to say, though, that if they have only factions in their hand, they must discard a faction for each money they cannot pay. Now I owe player 3 1 megabuck, so I have to discard 1 card. And in all cases, if I was supposed to pay a megabuck directly to an opponent, that opponent is compensated from the treasury for the amount. So I can't pay them anything, but so they'll still get their megabuck from the treasury, putting it into their hand, forcing me also to discard a card. So then I would go through the deck and say, all right, which one do I want to discard? So I'll discard this and put it into the cemetery, like so. And then that's the end of player 3's turn. So our next step is to resolve this top event. Let's draw up this event card. The Poodle Beach Sun. This event, nothing happens. Wow, that's a big lucky draw for the first event. So not bad. But let's go ahead and fast forward to what an election would look like so that you guys can get a general idea of that. So the first election here is for the House of Representatives. So when this election event happens, very simply, players count and announce their votes. The winner adds this faction to his or her coalition and gets the first player token. So looking around the table, the only person that has any votes would be player 3 with 3 votes because they forced me to put a card back into my hand. So they would get this gold and put it into their gold faction stack. And then that's the game. And so as you build out your different factions, you are going to keep them color coordinated. So anytime you have it, you want to keep their values and their names revealed, because there are going to be certain times where if you have a name of something specific, something else is potentially going to happen. One example, as I was going through player 3's card, was, let's see here. There we go. Asian Americans, right here. Draw a faction. If academics or small business owners are in your coalition, I get 3 megabucks. So you want to always be able to show, yikes. You always want to be able to show the names so that when resolving that, you know exactly what's in your coalition here. So anyway, guys, that is Super PACS. I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to clean up the table and stay tuned for my afterthoughts. Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed that brief setup and playthrough of the game Super PACS. So my initial thoughts. I kickstarted this one, I guess, oh man, I guess it was 2016, right? So I'm just now getting a video out and getting it to the table. This was a very low Kickstarter campaign. It barely met its goal, but what really drew me to the game initially was its artwork and its kind of satire, playfulness against all the political drama that was happening around that time. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I like kind of politically charged things. I thought it would be a pretty neat game to add to my collection. And I'm a little ashamed that I'm just now here in 2020 getting around to finally getting a review and actually playing it very recently. So my initial impressions of Super PACS as playing through it is it was definitely a lot of fun. There's some strategy involved when making your decisions and a ton of take that mechanics, which not for everyone, I get that, but definitely a style that I really enjoy. So when there's a lot of kind of take that mechanics, I'm a fan of a game because, well, I like to win. And the people that I play with are usually competitive, so we manage to remain friends even after the game is over, even after a player does kind of get attacked on quite a bit. So during that playthrough, you might have noticed that I immediately attacked the second player, but once third player came around, they were able to kind of attack me right back. So that's the type of game this is. Much like the cutthroat game of politics, things can be kind of backstabby or really take that. So why should you add this type of game into your collection? Well, if you like a pretty straightforward sort of tableau builder style game, this might be up your alley. If you like games that are politically themed, well, this is kind of chock full of that. The game is really streamlined and straightforward. You do 2 initial actions. You can buy investments if you can throughout your turn, do a separate power, but that's kind of it. You know, doing 1, 2, 3, done, moving along. So the flow of the game was really good, kind of quickly paced, but not too fast, where I didn't have time to kind of figure out the type of strategy that I wanted to do. The only downside of that, I guess, is that as you're building cards into your coalition, you're kind of at the mercy of luck of the draw, which is okay. You know, no game is without that mechanic. Why should you not add this game to your collection? Well, if politically charged themes are not for your board game crew, definitely do not. If it's going to spark any sort of debate and lose friends over it, don't do it. If you guys hate take that mechanics, well, this one has them at every other turn, it feels like. So this is not really a friendly or nice game. Definitely not a co-op, something that you really want to try to strive and be competitive to win. So if you like those types of game, add it. If you don't, you might want to give this one a miss. But its playtime is pretty straightforward and simple. Definitely something worth the investment. It's pretty cheap. I think it's only like 20 bucks, something like that. Maybe even less now if you can find it on Amazon. So guys, that's my take of Super PACS, the political game about the game of politics. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments. I'm happy to answer them. If you like what we're doing here at Meeple Bits, please give me a subscribe. I definitely appreciate the support. So until next time, guys, thanks for watching.